In this video, I'll explain everything that you need to consider when planning a new co-op. I will use a practical example and demonstrate some of the critical decisions required to set up your co-op optimally for success, and end off with a few top tips. There are some interesting concepts, so let's jump right in. A co-op can be defined as a legal entity formed by a group of 5 or more people to provide goods and services to its members. In its simplest terms, a co-op is a membership club which operates as a business. Of all the legal entities available in South Africa, a co-op is by far the most democratic and egalitarian. This is because all members have an equal say in how the business is managed and have one vote regardless of how many shares they own. It is often misunderstood that the profits of a co-op are not always equally distributed, as the profit each member receives is determined either by the number of shares they own or by the amount of business the individual members do with the co-op. The general rule is the more money you invest in a co-op, the more shares you will receive, and therefore the more profits you will be entitled to. I will illustrate this later using our online planning tool. However, co-ops remain more inclusive and equitable than private companies, as the business operates on shared values owing to equal voting rights. In South Africa, there are 4 types of co-ops, namely primary, secondary, tertiary, and apex. When starting a new co-op, it will always be a primary co-op. The remaining types of co-ops are simply groups of existing primary co-ops which have joined together to form larger and larger co-ops, as can be seen in this table. The logic behind grouping co-ops together is to achieve greater representation and more bargaining power when conducting business. But for the purpose of this video, we will focus on primary co-ops, which is the most common. CIPC has categorized primary co-ops into 6 industry sectors, namely agricultural, financial, housing, non-specific, social and worker co-ops, each with their own standard constitution already drafted by CIPC. Regardless of which category your co-op falls into, they will all operate on the same principle. So let's take a look at a practical example. Go to SwiftRidge and click on the Co-op button where you'll find our Co-op planning tool. This is a free service which has been designed to help you with the 10 most important decisions you need to make to finalize your ownership of the co-op. By entering your data into the planning tool, it will calculate the number of shares each member should receive, as well as the percentage profit each member will be entitled to, which is essential information for those intending to register a co-op. For ease of use, we have defaulted the values of our fictional example, which I will explain shortly, into this planning tool. This is to give you a rough idea of some of the values which are required to generate the shareholding table. To use this tool, simply type your information over the existing values and click on the Calculate button to display the ownership table of your proposed co-op. The example you see here is a small fishing business based in Kalk Bay. The first step is for our fishermen to get together to decide on how much money they plan to raise, as it is their intention to buy a small fishing boat. To do this accurately, it is recommended that they draw up a business plan. This initial meeting of members is referred to as the pre-incorporation meeting, and it is where all 10 of these decisions should be agreed upon. Our fishermen agreed to raise 50,000 Rand to purchase their fishing boat for their agricultural co-op called Kalk Bay Fishing Co-op Limited. To make our example easier, we selected the minimum number of members, which is 5, but you can enter any number. And it is important to remember that all the members automatically become owners and will therefore be responsible to club together to finance the co-op. At this point, you also need to decide on the amount of authorized share capital that needs to be created. This is the number of available shares created out of thin air to be distributed amongst its members. In our example, the members created 2,000 authorized shares. The authorized shares have no value until they are issued to the members, as only issued shares make up the ownership of a co-op. It is advisable not to issue all the authorized share capital to the members, as this will allow the co-op to retain shares to issue to new members in the future without having to create additional authorized share capital. In our example, the members issued 1,000 shares in total to themselves, which means the co-op has another 1,000 unallocated shares available for future use should new members join the co-op. It is vital to understand that the number of authorized shares has nothing to do with the value of the co-op. The value of a share is determined by the price agreed on by a willing buyer and a willing seller. To create millions of authorized share capital only complicates the calculations. Should you need to know more about this topic, I have made a separate video on understanding authorized share capital. Moving on to cell 5 and 6 of the planning tool, the entrance fee and startup funding. As mentioned earlier, it is the responsibility of the members to fund the co-op, and there are essentially 3 ways to raise funds in the co-op: an entrance fee, shareholding contributions, or both. Our fishermen decided on the third option, which is a non-refundable entrance fee of 250 Rand, as well as individual share contributions. Since the funds from the entrance fee alone were not adequate to purchase the boat, the members needed to raise further funds using shareholding contributions. In our example, all the members contributed equally to the outstanding funds and were therefore allocated equal number of shares, but more on this later. The next item in our planning tool is par value shares. I've made a separate video on this topic should you wish to know more about it, but just let's recap some of the main points. The par value is the fixed minimum value a share can be traded at. It is also the maximum value of the member's liability to the co-op. For this reason alone, it should be in your interest to set the par value shares as low as possible. As you can see in our example, we settled on 10 Rand for a single share. It is also important to be aware that the standard constitutions value shares on termination and death on par value and not the actual value, but this can be addressed by amending the co-op constitution. The members also need to agree on how they will contribute to the running costs. One option is to agree on a non-refundable annual fee, and the other is the user pay principle, which is where some members make use of the co-op equipment more than others. For example, if a farming co-op owns a combine harvester and only 2 of the 5 farmers use the harvester, then only those farmers using the equipment pay for the running costs. In our example, the fishermen all agreed on a 250 Rand annual fee. The final concept in the planning phase is how the profits will be divided amongst the members. Should the profits be split based on the shareholding of each member or the amount of business that each member has done with the co-op during the year? This is called the patronage principle. Our fishermen agreed to split the profits based on the number of shares each member owns. Well done, you have managed to get through all 10 of the important decisions. So go ahead and click the calculate button. Remember I mentioned earlier that the fishermen decided to contribute equal amounts to the fishing vessel. However, in reality, this may not always be the case, as some members may contribute financially more than others. So do experiment with the tool by typing different amounts of share contributions for each member, and then try and reach the required amount of money you need to raise. The shareholding will automatically recalculate if you use the enter key or the recalculate button. On a side note, in some cases you may find the members who have been issued shares may not have paid the co-op the full amount agreed upon. In such a scenario, the members are only entitled to part of the profit equivalent to the percentage paid up proportion of the shares. Fortunately, our management module does cater for these scenarios. The center column is the actual value of the member's shares. For demonstration purposes, we set the actual value of the shares to be the same as the total investment amount at the start of the business. But hopefully the co-op will be successful and the actual value of the shares will increase in the future. We have also displayed the value of the par value shares in this table so we can introduce the concept of a share premium. This might all be getting a bit confusing, but stay with me. The actual value of the shares is made up of par value plus a share premium. Because the par value is a fixed value and the actual value varies, the share premium amount also varies, as it is effectively just a book entry created for the sole purpose to balance the books of the co-op. You can largely ignore this value, as in practical terms it is meaningless. After experimenting with the numbers and all the members are satisfied with the proposed ownership percentage, click on the member's share certificate and see an example of the proof of ownership. It is mandatory for each member to have a share certificate to keep as proof of the ownership of the co-op. Remember, the certificates are only validated once all three parties sign it. Now, the intention of this video and the planning tool is to assist and educate as many people as possible by empowering everybody with knowledge they need to run a co-op successfully. If you'd like more help or support to register your co-op, please click on the register button, and the data you have captured will be drawn through from this planning tool to our registration section. We issue membership certificates just like this one for all new members who register with us. If you already have an existing co-op, you may be aware of the legal responsibilities the directors must adhere to. I've made a separate video on this topic where I demonstrate our membership management module, which is designed to help the directors remain compliant with the Co-op Act and keep track of ownership, issuing new membership shares, sending out AGM notices, managing loans, and viewing reports. To end off, I'd like to leave you with the following 2 tips. 1, I would recommend that each member reads and familiarizes themselves with the co-op constitution, as this should reduce potential misunderstandings which could lead to conflict between members. And secondly, each member is also required to have their own email address, as CIPC does not allow for email duplication. This has been one of my more complex videos, but I hope you found it informative. So as always, remember, we are here to help.